So here we go yet again. I say that because I know there was a press conference this morning where the mayors of Montreal boroughs basically made their pitch to the city to give them more money or else. And that or else is not a threat, but it's a threat to citizens in the community because without that money, they're looking at either higher taxes or cut to services, and that's obviously something no one wants to entertain. Jim Beis is one of those mayors. He is the mayor of Pierrefonds-Roxboro. He is on the line. Jim, thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let me begin. Look, it seems to me we've talked about this now. I think we talked about this once the new valuation rules came out and taxes were set and how some boroughs got hit harder than others. This is not about that specifically. This is about the fact that the city has been basically giving the boroughs less and less money. Is that it?
Well, this is it. I mean, we know that fixed costs at large have gone up for everybody, let alone cities, for sure, even in our personal lives. We know this. But for a number of years now, we have been asking the administration, we've been criticizing them for the lack of funding for the boroughs. And, the other thing, too, is that we're not only announcing that our funding will not be increased, they are reducing the funding that's coming to the boroughs, which estimates approximately $10 million. On Monday, Tuesday of next week at City Council, we're depositing a motion. For whatever it's worth, we need to make sure that they recognize what our demands are. And for example, the demands are that the transfers be increased to compensate for additional financial burden caused by the new collective agreements, for example. And when you look at that, when the city of Montreal gives us 1% a year, let's say, to cover some of those expenses, the collective agreements go up 3.3. So we're already at a deficit from the beginning. And not to mention that boroughs like mine that understand the capacity of the taxpayer to pay cannot put a borough tax, an elevated borough tax, knowing that it's going to be passed on to the residents. So what we do, we have a small borough tax, but then we have to dig into our surplus in the neighborhood of $1.3 million for next year so that we can offset slightly some of the burden to the residents. And that's not sound management as far as we're concerned. And again, we're talking on behalf of Ensemble Montreal, but certainly the mayors in Projet Montréal and some of the independents are feeling the same pressure. And so this has to stop. When you look at 3,000 employees that have been added since this in the center city, since this administration took charge, they've added $2 billion to the operating budget in Montreal since we were there. What did we really get in return? And so our philosophy has been, as it is in my community, we have to reject sometimes different contracts when we know that the price is elevated and much more expensive than our estimates, because responsibly, we have to prioritize our actions and say, okay, if we can't do it this time, maybe we'll do it in 3, 4, 5 months if it's not necessary at this moment. And so does Montreal do that? That is one of the issues that we're dealing with that we need to talk about for sure.
It's interesting, though, as I hear you say this, this is not really anything new. And I'm glad that you brought up, because I think people look at this perhaps and go, well, of course, it's Ensemble Montreal boroughs, it's not the mayor's party. But you just said this is pretty much across the city. So this is not just the opposition. It's her own party boroughs that are hurting as well?
There is no question about it. We know through the administrations, not the elected body, because I'd like to see if any one of the elected bodies of Projet Montréal would speak on behalf of the budget. But I can tell you that all of them are dealing with the same issues, and most of them also go into their surpluses to balance their books. Imagine, that's like you and me going into, if we're fortunate enough to be able to save, and we know how difficult that is in today's life, is to go into our savings just to pay the bills at the end of the month. And so this is basically what we're doing in the boroughs. And so when you look at since 2017, the transfers have increased to only 15%. And I don't want to boggle the audience with statistics, but it's important to know that the transfers have increased by only 15%, while the inflation in Montreal has been around 27%. And on the other side of that, for the same period, spending has increased by 24% for the boroughs, but for the central services, it's been 41%. Well, what are they spending above and beyond the boroughs? Because that means that all the money that's going back to Montreal and the minimal transfers they give us, they're spending more in Montreal than they're giving to their boroughs. Aren't we all the same taxpayers at the end of the day?
So a lot of people might think, well, this will simply fall on deaf ears, even though maybe the idea that, some services will have to be cut or taxes will have to be increased in some areas. Is there a timetable? I mean, do you have a window on this as to when this has to happen for you not to do those things?
Well, we're approaching budget time very soon. Within the next month or so, we are in the boroughs, by the way, we've been in the budget sort of preparation part of it since the summer. Once that's sent to Montreal, then that will be passed at Montreal Council. But I'll give you some concrete examples, Aaron, just so people can understand. We passed at Council here $150,000 last Monday of our taxpayer money just to deal with the floods of August 9th that we weren't getting from Montreal. Well, that $150,000 is taken from the operating budget that will undoubtedly affect services as we move forward. And, as mayors, we have to say to ourselves, where are we going to cut that doesn't affect citizen services? And when I talk about citizen services, it could be anything from cutting grass, could be anything from cleaning streets, it could be anything from the reaction time when somebody calls to get some service. Will it be 24 hours now or will it be 3 days later? Mm-hmm. Because we don't have the resources to be able to do that. And at the same time, the city is asking us to cut positions at the borough level when we're almost a skeleton staff trying to provide the basic status quo services year after year. So these are issues that I do not think that they understand at the administration. And certainly we understand that money doesn't grow on trees. But we can also prioritize our actions in Montreal and, for heaven's sake, cut a bit of spending for some of the things that maybe are wish list and not necessarily priorities.
Can we talk about those? Because other than jobs that you mentioned, the city, based on the numbers I'm seeing today, has gone on a bit of a hiring spree, which strikes me as kind of odd, especially when we're hearing at the same time. I found out yesterday the city has actually cut the SPVM's budget, and obviously they need money, and maybe this is why this is happening. But given that, beyond hiring people, what's the option here for Projet Montréal to do to make this more equitable?
Well, I think Projet Montréal, what they should do is they should look at their expenditures and some of the projects that they have in line. They should look at the necessity of having these, particularly in the financial situation that Montreal not only is at the moment, but has been for a number of years.
Yeah.
I mean, at home, if I can't afford something to eat today, I'm going to eat something different so that the cost is less. And I'm really simplifying things, but so that folks can understand, we don't always need everything top priority in Montreal when we do it. Certainly they can hold off on some of the expenses until we get everything back on track. And then and only then can we decide, because if that does not happen, then who ends up paying the bill at the end of the day? It's the residents and the ones that are already struggling day to day to make ends meet. We hear the stories. We know the food banks are overwhelmed. We know people don't have jobs. There's no housing available. And here now we're adding a potential burden to them with some taxes next year. They may come on the last year of the evaluation roll, when we know that after that we have another 3 years of evaluation roll, with chances being that it's going to be up again, and then taxes will be affected once again. So is anybody looking down the road to see what the predictions may be so that we don't have an effect, or are we just thinking about today and what we can do today? And that's, I think, the unfortunate reality. We're going to be scrutinizing the budget, Aaron, as we move forward, and we will try to get what we need to get, not only for our boroughs, because this is not a political... It is, look, we're in politics. We have to have these types of conferences and deposit motions. But at the end of the day, we know as well that it affects all the residents of Montreal and in their boroughs too. And I'd like to see, hopefully, that some of their people rise up and say, well, look, we're dealing with it too, and we have a problem with it.
I think it'd be one thing if you could sit back and go, look, based on all these other people that they've been hiring, these additional people, look at how better services, how better things have become. I don't think that's necessarily one of those cases in this particular case.
Well, that's exactly my point. I mean, even when you look at the $2 billion, that more than $2 billion that they've added to the operating budget, on top of the thousands of employees that they added, well, what have we gotten back in return? I don't know. I mean, I can't quantify it. And unfortunately, these are the questions that we need to keep asking to try to get some resolve, because I don't understand it. And I've been in this for 35 years, Aaron. And if I don't understand it, certainly others don't understand it too. And so, yes, it is a financial issue. Yes, there are costs that are going up day to day for everybody, including cities. But my issue is, let's prioritize our actions and maybe not do some of the wish things that they may be thinking of doing, and then start putting back money to the areas that need it most. And in my opinion, what needs it most is cities, every city across the world. We are a service-based industry. We are there to provide a service to residents. End of story. That is exactly what we need to do. And if we don't have the resources to be able to do that, well, then what happens? Services will suffer. It may be that grass isn't being cut in the parks, every week, maybe every 2 weeks. It may be, other, issues that affect people's quality of life. But all that is going to have to give at some point, because Otherwise, we tax residents that don't have the capacity to pay. Yeah. So society as a whole will suffer from it. We always talk about finding some resolve for folks that are vulnerable in the community, but do we ever talk about how they get to those vulnerable situations? Well, keep adding, money here. Keep adding registration costs to build a metro line. Keep adding, money to people that don't have the resources to be able to pay it. Well, ultimately, you're going to put everybody or most people in a vulnerable situation if they're not already. So these are some of the social issues, unfortunately, that are the collateral, result of these types of decisions.
Last thing I will ask, we're running out of time here, is part of what you're asking for, did you mention this is indexation?
Yes, that's exactly what we're asking for as well. We have to index the transfers. We're asking for that make sure that it's 2%, even though we know that the cost of living is a little more than that. We feel that we had it at 2% for 2 years. And you know what they were saying? They were saying, well, we doubled, the transfers. They did double it, on paper, but 1 to 2% is what they did. And they did that for 2 years. And now we've gotten notice that they will give us 1% in 2025, when we know that the cost of just the contracts they have with the staff is 3.3 on average. So I don't know where they get these numbers, because ultimately it leaves us and others, in our case, dipping into our surpluses at 1.3 million of our taxpayers, money and fund in case of a rainy day for major projects that is being used just to balance the books. And like I said, it's not sound management, and all this needs to be reworked for sure.
Hey, Jim, there's a municipal election next November.
Well, this is it, and let me just say this, Aaron, because you bring it up, and I'm going to say it. We have to really think about how apathetic we've become in the political sphere. There are good people that will probably present themselves at the next election. Folks need to go out and vote. They don't need to vote for me. They don't need to vote for anybody particular, but they just need to go and vote, because 35% of folks going out to vote won't make much of a change, unfortunately. So that would be my message to the general public.
We'll leave it at that. Jim, it's always good hearing from you, and good luck. Thanks so much.
You well.
Jim Beis, the mayor of Pierrefonds-Roxboro.